Imagine waking up to find that a major media figure is blaming witches for the death of a political leader. Sounds like a movie plot, right? But this is exactly what happened when Megyn Kelly, once a mainstream television host, publicly linked Charlie Kirk's murder to so-called witchcraft. The bizarre story began when Jezebel, a well-known website, published a satirical piece about hiring witches on Etsy to place a curse on Kirk. The article was tongue-in-cheek, written more as a stunt than anything else, but it quickly gained attention because it detailed how they bought a spell from an online seller. In their closing remarks, the writer admitted they never wished Kirk harm, but the piece was still deleted soon after his death, replaced with a note explaining it was satire and pulled out of caution for the staff's safety. To many readers, it was just edgy humor, but Megyn Kelly saw it very differently. She claimed that these curses frightened Kirk's wife Erica so much that the couple reached out to a Catholic priest to pray over them the night before he was killed. Kelly described this as proof that spiritual forces were at play and warned that demons, witches, and the devil are not a joke. She argued that calling on the spirit world has real consequences and that Christian families like the Kirks were tormented by Jezebel's stunts. This led her into a wider point, saying Christians view attempts to summon spirits as dangerous because they acknowledge not just God, but the reality of evil forces. To back this up, she referenced priests who have spoken about how things like Ouija boards or casual dabbling in the occult could allegedly invite dark presences. Kelly made it clear she believed the curses were serious and implied they weighed heavily on Erica Kirk in her final days with Charlie. But others saw this reaction as outlandish. Online, people mocked the idea that Etsy witches were more to blame than the gun violence and political radicalization that had actually fueled Kirk's assassination. Critics argued it was easier for some commentators to focus on demons and magic than to confront the very real dangers of America's culture of extremism and weak gun laws, issues Kirk himself had been closely tied to. To them, it felt like misdirection, blaming supernatural forces instead of acknowledging the volatile mix of politics and violence. Yet the story doesn't just reveal how divided people are about Kirk's death, it highlights how satire, religion, and media collide in unpredictable ways. Jezebel never intended its piece to be taken literally, but once tragedy struck, the symbolic language of curses and witches became a weapon in the culture war. For Kelly and her audience, it reinforced a worldview where spiritual battles play out alongside political ones. For critics, it was proof of how unserious the conversation around violence has become. And in the middle of it all was a grieving family caught between satire, faith, and conspiracy-like claims. Whether you believe in curses or not, the fact that a national debate is unfolding over Etsy witches shows how surreal public discourse has become. What was meant as satire has now been spun into a narrative about demons, spiritual warfare, and evil forces, all while the real-world issues of political violence remain unsolved. It's a strange and unsettling moment that reveals more about America's divisions than it does about witches on the internet. In the end, the story forces us to ask, are we really talking about spells, or are we avoiding the harder truths about what drives violence in our society?